My parents said our trip was cancelled because I didn't deserve a reward. You embarrassed us at school, so no vacation. Then I found the plane tickets they bought. For my sister only. I sat at the dinner table, nervously poking at my plate of spaghetti. The air felt thicker than usual. Mom and Dad had been unusually quiet, exchanging looks behind their glasses of wine. I was no stranger to tense family dinners, but this one felt different. Something was off. Mom? Dad? I asked, trying to break the silence. My younger sister Lily, who sat next to me, was too busy texting on her phone to notice. She had that way of being effortlessly perfect, always in control of the situation. I could feel my irritation bubbling under the surface. We were supposed to go on a vacation soon, something I had been looking forward to for months. A weekend getaway to Maine, just the four of us. It was meant to be a reward for all the hard work I had put into school, for keeping my grades at a respectable level despite everything else going on in my life. But there was something about the way Mom and Dad were acting tonight that made me feel like it wasn't going to happen. Finally, my mother, Claire, set down her fork and looked at me. Her gaze was cold, almost calculating. "Amy, we need to talk about the trip," she said, her voice stiff. I looked at her, confused. "What do you mean?" "The trip's coming up." I thought everything was set. Dad, who had been quiet up until now, cleared his throat and leaned forward. "No, it's not happening," he said, his voice flat. "We've decided to cancel it." My stomach dropped. "What? But why?" Lily glanced up from her phone, but only for a moment, as if this wasn't a big deal to her. "You've embarrassed us, Amy," Mom continued, her eyes narrowing. "Your grades have slipped, and your behavior at school is becoming a problem. We can't just reward that." I felt a rush of heat in my chest, a mixture of confusion and anger. "What are you talking about? My grades aren't great, but I've been working hard. And my behavior, what do you mean by that?" Dad sighed, his fingers tapping on the edge of his wine glass. "It's not just about grades. It's the way you've been acting. You're not the same kid you used to be. You've been distant, unmotivated. We can't just pretend everything's fine. We've been telling you for months." I stared at them, heart pounding. I knew my grades weren't perfect. I hadn't been an honor roll student like Lily, but I had put in effort. More effort than I had ever given before. I wanted that vacation, wanted to feel like I had earned something for once. "You can't cancel the trip just because of a couple of bad grades," I said, my voice shaking. "That's not fair." Mom and Dad exchanged a brief look before Mom spoke again. "We're not doing this anymore, Amy. You've disappointed us." I could feel my world crumbling in that moment, the words hitting harder than I could have imagined. I had worked so hard. I'd tried to be better. But it felt like no matter what I did, it was never good enough. I looked at Lily, hoping maybe she'd say something, anything, but she was busy texting again, her eyes flickering with indifference. I didn't expect her to understand. She was perfect in their eyes, and I was just the screw-up. "But you promised." I almost shouted, the frustration in my chest boiling over. "Promises are only meaningful when you've earned them, Amy," Mom said coldly, crossing her arms. "And you haven't earned this one." I sat there, stunned, unable to find the words to argue anymore. There was no way to convince them. The trip was cancelled, and I was the reason. I went to my room after dinner, my mind racing. I couldn't accept what had just happened. How could they do this to me? How could they just take something away that I had been looking forward to for months? But as I sat there, the reality of it all hit harder than I expected. This wasn't just about a vacation. It was about something deeper, something I had been ignoring for years. My parents didn't see me the way they saw Lily. I was never going to be the perfect child they wanted. I was always going to fall short. That night, after tossing and turning in my bed for hours, something made me get up. A sudden thought gnawed at me, and I couldn't ignore it. There had to be more to this. They couldn't just cancel the trip without any warning or explanation. Something wasn't right. I got up quietly and headed downstairs, my heart pounding in my chest. I didn't know what I was looking for, but I felt the need to check. My parents' bedroom door was slightly ajar, and I noticed a glint of light reflecting off something on their dresser. Curiosity won over, and I quietly pushed the door open. There, right on top of their dresser, was a small envelope. It was plain, nothing special. But it was enough to catch my eye. I walked over and picked it up, the weight of what I was holding starting to hit me as I saw the name on the front. The envelope had Lily's name on it. I opened it cautiously, and inside were plane tickets. To Maine. For the same trip my parents had just told me I wouldn't be going on. I felt the blood drain from my face as I processed what I was seeing. The trip wasn't cancelled. It wasn't cancelled for Lily. It was cancelled for me. I stood there, frozen, the tickets in my hand as everything about this situation came crashing down around me. They had promised us a family vacation, but it wasn't a family trip at all. It was a trip for Lily. And I had been excluded. The rage and heartbreak I felt in that moment were overwhelming. I had been right all along. I was never going to be enough for them. No matter how hard I tried, I would always be the one left behind. I took the tickets and walked back to my room, my hands shaking. I didn't know what to do with them, but I knew one thing for sure: I had to confront them. I had to know why. Why did they do this? Why did they betray me like this? When I walked into the living room the next morning, my parents were sitting on the couch, casually sipping their coffee. Lily was nowhere to be seen, probably still asleep, completely oblivious to the mess that had been created. Without saying anything, I dropped the tickets on the coffee table. My mother glanced down at them, and her face went pale. Dad sat up straight, his eyes immediately locking with mine. "Amy." Mom started, but I cut her off before she could finish. "Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you tell me you bought the tickets for Lily?" My voice was a mixture of anger and hurt. "What happened to the family vacation? What happened to the promise you made?" Dad's expression hardened, and I saw the familiar look of cold detachment settle into his eyes. "This isn't the time to talk about that," he said firmly. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "It's always the time to talk about this. You lied to me. You used me as an excuse to punish me." Mom stood up and walked toward me, her expression softening slightly, but there was no apology in her eyes, only a sense of control. "You don't understand, Amy. We made the right decision. You didn't earn this trip. Lily did." I felt like the floor had fallen out from beneath me. It wasn't just about the trip anymore. It was about their expectations. It was about how I would never be good enough. No matter what I did. No matter how hard I tried. I stared at her, tears welling up in my eyes, my heart breaking. "I don't deserve to be treated like this," I whispered. Mom didn't respond. She just looked at me, waiting for me to accept it, to accept the fact that I would never be the perfect child they wanted me to be. I stood there for a long moment, the silence between us thick and suffocating. The weight of what they had just said hung over me, pressing down on my chest. My fingers still clutched the plane tickets, crumpling slightly as my grip tightened. It felt like I was holding on to the last remnants of hope, even though I knew it was already gone. Lily came into the living room just then, completely unaware of the storm that had just unfolded. She smiled brightly at me, then looked at the tickets on the table. The smile faltered for a second as she glanced from the tickets to our parents, but she didn't say anything. She never did. She didn't need to. Everything she did was always right in their eyes. I wanted to scream. I wanted to demand she understand what had just happened, to see how unfair it all was. But the truth was, she probably wouldn't even understand. She was the golden child, the one who could do no wrong, the one who never had to work hard for anything because it all came easily to her. And I was the one left standing in the shadow of her perfection, always trying to measure up, but never quite making it. Good morning, Lily said, her voice still chipper, oblivious to the tension in the room. She sat down on the couch, flipping her hair over her shoulder in that way that always seemed to annoy me. I didn't respond. What was the point? She was just going to say something meaningless like, "It'll be okay," or, "It's not a big deal." It was a big deal to me. This wasn't just about a vacation, this was about everything I had been trying to prove. It was about how, no matter what I did, I was never enough. My dad cleared his throat, breaking the silence. "Lily, honey, we need to talk." Lily looked from me to my parents and back again. The light in her eyes dimmed as she saw the tension that had built up. She shifted uncomfortably, her earlier smile vanishing. I couldn't help but wonder if, for once, she was starting to realize that maybe this wasn't just about me. Maybe it was about them, too. "What is it?" she asked, her voice now sounding more uncertain than usual. I could see her glancing at the tickets, and I knew she was starting to piece things together. But before she could say anything, Mom cut in. "Amy doesn't deserve to go on this trip," she said sharply, her gaze fixed on me. "Her behavior this year hasn't been acceptable. She hasn't shown the maturity or responsibility that we expect from her." I could feel my heart sinking again, the same old sting from years of being told I wasn't enough. "I've tried," I whispered, more to myself than to anyone in the room. Dad looked at me for a long moment, and for the first time, I saw something like regret flash across his face. But it was quickly replaced by something else, something colder. "We've made a decision. There's no turning back now." Lily's eyes widened as the words sunk in. For the first time, she was looking at me like I was someone she didn't fully understand. It wasn't anger or judgment in her eyes, but confusion. She didn't get it. She didn't have to. "Amy, I don't understand." Lily started, her voice soft, hesitant. But I wasn't in the mood for her pity. "No, you wouldn't," I shot back, unable to stop myself. "You've never had to fight for anything. Everything just works out for you, doesn't it?" I immediately regretted my words. The bitterness, the jealousy, it was all bubbling up now, and I couldn't hold it back. Lily recoiled slightly, looking at me with wide eyes, clearly hurt by the sudden attack. But I didn't care. In that moment, I wanted her to feel the anger, the frustration that had been building inside me for years. I wanted her to understand what it felt like to always be second place. "Amy, that's enough," my mom snapped. Her tone was sharp, a reminder that even in the middle of everything, I was still the one who wasn't behaving properly. I wanted to argue, to stand up for myself, but I couldn't find the words. Everything felt hollow. Instead, I just turned and left the room, my feet carrying me to the only place I could think to go, my bedroom. I slammed the door behind me and sat down on the edge of my bed, clutching the plane tickets in my hands. My breath came in ragged gasps as the tears finally spilled over, hot and fast. I didn't know how long I sat there, the tickets crumpling in my fist as the sobs racked through my body. Everything hurts. I didn't just feel abandoned by my parents, I felt invisible. Like nothing I did mattered, like I was never going to be enough for them. And yet, I couldn't stop trying. I still wanted their approval, still longed for a time when I was the one they looked at with pride. But the truth was, I was starting to realize that would never happen. No matter what I did, no matter how hard I worked, I would always be overshadowed by Lily's perfection. Eventually, the sobs quieted down, and I found myself staring blankly at the wall. I was exhausted. Physically and emotionally drained from all the hurt I'd been carrying around for so long. How did I get here? How did things get this bad? I heard a knock at my door, but I didn't have the energy to respond. I just wanted to be left alone. But the door creaked open, and my mom's voice came through, quieter this time. "Amy, can we talk?" she asked, sounding almost uncertain. I didn't answer immediately. I didn't know if I could. But after a long pause, I finally spoke, my voice small, almost like a whisper. "Why are you doing this? Why did you buy the tickets for Lily and not me? What did I do that made you want to punish me so much?" I could hear her sigh from the other side of the door. Amy, it's not about punishing you. It's about what's best for the family. We've tried to explain this. Explain it better, then, I said, my words laced with more bitterness than I meant. Because right now, all I hear is that you don't care about me. There was a long pause before she spoke again. I do care about you. I'm sorry. But we've been trying to make you see that you need to step up more. You're not living up to your potential, Amy. You're capable of so much more, but you've been stagnant. I can't keep enabling that. I didn't know how to respond to that. All I felt was a crushing wave of defeat. I wasn't stagnant. I had tried, but it was never enough. I had tried so hard to be better, to be what they wanted me to be, but it never mattered. Amy, please, just talk to us, she said, her voice softer now, but I could hear the underlying frustration. She didn't get it. She didn't see the bigger picture. I wiped my eyes and stood up, pacing back and forth in my room. My heart was pounding in my chest, my mind racing. I felt like I was drowning in my own emotions. I don't know what you want me to say, Mom. I've tried everything. I've tried to be who you wanted me to be, but it's never enough. It will never be enough. There was a moment of silence on the other end of the door, and I thought maybe she would finally say something to comfort me. But instead, she spoke in that same distant tone she always used when she was frustrated. I think we need some space, Amy. We'll talk later. And with that, she left, leaving me alone with my thoughts and the crushing weight of the reality I had just faced. I sat back down on my bed, feeling the loneliness set in again. The conversation hadn't gone the way I had hoped. Nothing had changed. I was still the one left behind, the one who wasn't good enough, and nothing I did would ever be enough to change that. I stared at the tickets again, wondering if it would have been better if I had never known. Maybe ignorance would have been easier. But the truth was, I would never be able to forget it now. I would never be able to forget how my family had chosen Lily over me, how they had made me feel invisible. And in that moment, I realized something: I was never going to be able to change them. But maybe, just maybe, it was time I started changing myself. It wasn't about them anymore. It was about me. And somehow, that realization made me feel a little stronger. The days that followed felt like an endless cycle of silence, disappointment, and tension. My parents went about their business as usual, as if nothing had changed, but I couldn't ignore the gaping wound inside me. Every time I saw them, it was as though a wall had been built between us, one that couldn't be torn down. It felt as if they had given up on me, and in turn, I had given up on seeking their approval. Lily, as always, was blissfully unaware. Or perhaps she wasn't unaware, but didn't care enough to understand. Either way, she continued to play her part in their perfect family. I couldn't bring myself to hate her for it. She didn't ask for this, but I resented how effortlessly she slipped into their expectations while I struggled to keep up. I started distancing myself even more. I stopped going to family events, skipped out on dinners when I could, and kept my distance from them, retreating to my room or taking long walks around the neighborhood to clear my head. The silence between us was deafening, and I knew they could feel it too. It was as if the more they tried to push me into being something I wasn't, the further I pulled away. But then something changed. A week after I discovered the plane tickets and confronted my parents, I got a call from my old friend, Claire. Yes, another Claire, but this one was different. Claire and I had been close throughout middle school, but we'd lost touch in high school when I became consumed with my parents' expectations. It had been years since we'd talked, but I was glad to hear from her now. Amy, hey. It's been forever. How are you? Her voice was warm, familiar, and comforting. She had always been the one person who never made me feel like I was falling short. I sat down on my bed, still feeling a little numb from everything that had happened. Hey, Claire. I'm okay, I guess. Just dealing with some stuff at home. Claire's tone immediately became more concerned. What kind of stuff? You can talk to me, you know that. I hesitated for a moment, unsure if I should share the painful details. But the truth was, I needed someone to listen. Someone who wasn't trying to fix me, someone who didn't have expectations. So I told her everything: the vacation, my parents, the plane tickets for Lily, how I felt like I'd been abandoned in favor of my sister's perfection. I don't know what to do anymore. I feel invisible, I said, my voice cracking a little. There was a long pause on the other end of the line, but when Claire spoke again, it was with the same warmth I remembered. Amy, I can't tell you what to do, but I can tell you this: you deserve to be happy. And sometimes, that means doing things that aren't what others expect. If they can't see your worth, then it's time to stop proving it to them. Live for yourself. Her words hit me like a ton of bricks. I knew she was right, but it was hard to accept. I had spent so many years trying to make them proud, trying to live up to their impossible standards. The thought of turning my back on their approval was terrifying, but at the same time, it was freeing. That night, after I hung up with Claire, I made a decision. I wasn't going to let them continue to control my life, to define my worth. I wasn't going to sit idly by and let them make me feel small anymore. I wasn't going to let them get away with this. And for the first time in years, I felt a spark of rebellion within me, not out of spite, but out of a need for justice. I would get my revenge. Not in the way they expected, not with cruelty or anger, but in a way that would make them realize what they had lost. What they had never truly understood. The next morning, I quietly went into my parents' room. They were still asleep, probably still enjoying the calm that had taken over our house after the confrontation. I didn't bother with a grand speech. I didn't need to say anything dramatic. I just took a deep breath and opened their dresser drawer, the one that held their important papers. And there, among the receipts and bills, I found it: the confirmation for the trip. The non-refundable vacation reservations. The one they'd promised me would never happen. I smiled to myself, a quiet sense of satisfaction bubbling up inside me. They didn't deserve to have this trip, not after everything they had done to me. But I didn't want to cancel it. I didn't want to ruin it for anyone. I wanted them to experience the consequences of their actions. So, I did something else. I took the confirmation and, without a second thought, I switched the names on the reservation. It was a simple task, just a couple of phone calls and an email, but it was all it took. I had changed the names on the flight tickets, the accommodations, and even the car rental. Instead of my parents and Lily, the reservation now had my name. It was a small, almost subtle act of defiance. But it felt incredible. I wasn't taking the vacation for myself, I was making them face the reality of what they had done. And the best part was that they wouldn't know it until they arrived at the airport. I spent the next couple of days acting as though nothing had changed. I kept my distance from them, and they continued to assume everything was fine. I didn't make any big reveals. I wasn't interested in confronting them immediately. That would come later. Finally, the day of the trip arrived. My parents and Lily woke up excited, packed, and ready to go. I could hear them downstairs, talking about the beautiful house they were going to stay in, the activities they had planned. Everything was perfect in their eyes. But as they were about to leave, I saw my parents' faces fall when they got a phone call. They weren't expecting it. The airline had called, telling them their reservation had been cancelled. It was an odd call, especially since they had confirmed the flight earlier that week. That's when I heard the panic in my mom's voice. "What do you mean it's cancelled?" she demanded, but I could tell the customer service representative wasn't giving them the answers they wanted. "We were told everything was set. We have the confirmation number right here. This is absurd." I didn't say a word. I just sat on the couch, quietly watching the show unfold. It took them another hour to figure out that the reservation had been altered. They contacted the rental car company, only to be told that the name on their reservation didn't match the one they had on file. The house they had rented was under my name, not theirs. There were no more available rooms for them. They were stranded. The look on their faces was priceless. It wasn't guilt, it wasn't even anger, it was confusion. They couldn't understand what had happened, why they had been left out of their own vacation. And then, as the pieces slowly started to click together, they turned to Lily, who was just as clueless as they were. "Why is the reservation in Amy's name?" my dad asked, his voice tight with frustration. I couldn't help myself. I stood up and walked into the room, where they were standing, their eyes wide with shock. "Maybe it's because I deserve it," I said calmly, my voice steady. "Maybe I'm the one who earned the trip. You were never going to take me anyway." The shock on their faces was enough to make me feel something I hadn't felt in years: satisfaction. I wasn't cruel about it. I wasn't trying to hurt them for the sake of hurting them. But I needed them to see what it felt like to lose something, to realize that I wasn't just a shadow in their perfect life. I was someone who deserved to be treated with respect, just like Lily. They stood there, speechless, for a long while, and in that moment, I knew I had made my point. "You'll have to figure out another way to get to Maine," I added casually, before turning and walking back to my room. "Enjoy your day." The vacation was cancelled for them, but for me, it was the final act of reclaiming my dignity. I didn't need their approval to feel validated anymore. I didn't need them to give me permission to live my life. I had taken control, and for the first time I felt like I was finally free. And when they returned home, looking defeated and exhausted, I didn't even bother to say a word. I didn't need to. They would never forget this, and that, in itself, was the sweetest revenge.